Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world, people you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you'll know their unfiltered career story. The bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. I'm Tolu, aka the Podfather, and I host What Makes You Tick.
Thank you, Podfather. I'm Richard Washington. I'm the owner of Tick Talent. We're delighted to sponsor this podcast. Who have we got on this
Rich
week?
in the building.
Oh, Jesus. I've been trying to lose weight, Tolly. Please don't bring it up. So, who's on the pod this week, Tolly?
So, this week's episode is Sean McCarry. What did you think of this week's episode?
So, love this one. I say that every week, but I tell you some specific reasons why. So Sean knows another person that we had on the pod very well because they went to school together, which is one of my very, very favourite clients of all time, Mr. Jeremy Keefe. And Sean probably is the most senior person that we've had on so far in terms of the responsibilities that he's managed to rise to in his career. Worked for some of the biggest companies in the world, Computercentre, Magento, Logitech, huge levels of responsibility. And I think this is one of those things that the higher you go in a business, typically the nicer the people are. And what I mean by that is to reach a level of responsibility where you're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds worth of revenue and thousands of employees, your level of communication skills, your level of empathy, your understanding of leadership, your ability to get results through people, to filter a vision and turn that into results and execution, to build world-class teams and run those teams and create massive loyalty is so high. And Sean, I think, is a living example of what it takes to reach that level, but stay incredibly humble, incredibly focused on learning, and just a wonderful person to talk to. I know that you enjoyed the conversation because you spoke quite heavily about emotional intelligence, which is really your subject matter expert area.
My swim lane. Yeah.
What did you most like about the conversation?
What I love about What Makes You Tick in general, right, is we talk to these absolutely amazing people and they're all just so nice and so normal, if that makes sense. Like sometimes you think they achieve such amazing things, you think that they must be like the most, no, but they're just like, they're like you and I. They work super hard though, and they've done like loads of different things to get them to that place. So for me, often it's really encouraging to see that like this is actually possible. You know, like they're not born as like Superman or Superwoman, but they've become Superman and Superwoman. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, Sean is another one of those people, super impressive. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Amazing. Well, I think people are going to love this episode, and there's certainly a huge amount of value to take. So without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Sean, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Thanks for joining.
No, delighted to be here.
Good. I'm really excited to hear about your story. So the first question we ask is, Sean, what makes you tick?
People.
Okay.
I really enjoy the challenges of leading people in the IT sector. I've been working in this sector for now over 30 years. Started at Dell Computers a long time ago, and had a long stint following that at Computercentre, where we saw growth. That was specifically in the government division, which when I left was doing more than £500 million in those days. I'm normally talking dollars. Being worked for many US companies. But that's where I really enjoyed my first leadership roles and saw high growth. So it's definitely the management of people. And I really believe in what's called emotional intelligence and how that helps in how you manage.
And what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
It means different leadership styles. It's how you interact and get the best out of people. You to have it, you've got to be, I think, self-aware. You've got to understand what impact you have on people. But it's really important to have those social skills, to have empathy. I think leaders that I've worked for before and the roles I've done many times with teams reporting to me, if you don't build that trust and that empathy, how can you succeed? And it goes back to my first comment about people. So emotional intelligence is the different ways in how you motivate, manage, coach, and generally lead people.
And when did that become an awareness for you? Is that something you've always been aware of, or was there a turning point for you where you started to really realize how important that was?
I think naturally, I've always been a people person, hence I'm in sales. But I really started to learn the value of that skill set when I was lucky enough to go to the Harvard Business School when I was at Novell. Novell was probably one of my, first senior executive roles, heading up the UK and Ireland business. And I was lucky enough to spend time on a program of leadership development. And a huge part of that was as well as understanding the financials and the balance sheets, but it really did go into the emotional intelligence and how to succeed as a leader. And since then, I've really had that self-awareness and managed people and given people what they need to succeed.
And how far into your career was that you started to learn that?
So I was it was just after Computercentre, so it was probably 10 years into my career where I really started learning those leadership styles or skills. So I came through the sales process and had that first management role at Computercentre, which was a great learning curve, and then it was when I moved into the software industry and the software world, it's when I really started to hone those skills.
And what would you say changed about your leadership style between Computercentre, the course that you did, and when you were leading at Novell? What were the main changes that you saw?
I think that's self-awareness. I think it's really important that different leaders, especially when it's second line management leaders, to build that trust, to get the best out of those individuals. You really need different leadership styles. So some people would want the coercive do what I say kind of approach, but naturally I'm more of a coaching style. So I'm more of a supportive coaching style. But in different circumstances, you do need those different leadership skills, and you only get that through self-awareness. So I think that's when I went from being that coaching leader into more of you need different leadership styles to be successful, because people need different things in different situations. So any good leaders would have multiple leadership styles.
So it sounds like it made you a bit more versatile and understanding different situations need different things and being able to actually give that to people.
Yeah, I think it makes you more of a fuller individual with that, because emotional intelligence isn't just in the business world. It's we touched on the social skills and how you interact with people. Being that I've said it several times already. That self-awareness of knowing what actions you do and how people react to that. It's incredibly important. And when you're really driving high growth, so in the last 3 organizations, I've been looking at between 200 and 300% revenue growth. The last one from approximately 150 million to $600 million within 2 years. So when you are managing those kind of environments, you're moving so fast, you need to give responsibility to your team and the individuals leading those teams. But you also need to understand to get the best and trust those people and give them the responsibility to deliver on that number.
How have you found the balance between those? Because I think it's a really, really fine balance.
The balance is very much on moving fast and making decisions quickly, and try not to make the wrong decisions. So
Mm.
using, it comes into this leadership style where you've got to know the detail as well. It's great to have the strategy and set the goals and communicate those goals to the team, but it's really important that you do get into the detail. You need to know the data, and you need to ensure through communication and relationships that your team understands why it's so critical to have that data to make the right decisions. When you're in high growth, normally you don't have enough resources because you continually recruiting, and to get the right resources to the right opportunities to maximize that growth, those decisions have got to be based on the right information and the right data. And that's where, to me, that trust that you get through the emotional intelligence of leadership with your team, it's a two-way street. You can't do everything yourself. You've got to delegate. You've got to have a trust in and provide people with the responsibility to be flexible with the outcome of, the objective is to deliver, massive sales growth and different people, different support whilst you go through that process.
And in talking about high growth, was that something that you chose on purpose? So you mentioned, your last 3 companies, there's been quite big growth targets. Is that something that you chose on purpose or something you kind of fell into?
I think it's, if you talk to any sales leader, managing growth is far more enjoyable and far more exciting than those non-growth environments. So I would say over probably the last 10 years, I've been attracted to those organizations that are looking for a transformation, and that transformation to deliver the growth. And the growth can be revenue, it can be profitability, or it can actually be when you're scaling up a team. I enjoy the coaching and the scaling of an organization to drive and deliver success. So I'd say over the last 10 years, I'm more selective when I'm talking to organizations, and I very much do see myself as a growth agent.
I think there's also a difference though between, trying to grow 20, 30, 40, 50% year on year, or, over a period, and going for 200, 300, 400% growth. That's quite a chunky challenge.
It is, but you always need the right solution or the right products to the demand's got to be in the market. But when you look at the process, you look at, how do you build that demand? How are you going to get that message out to those enterprise customers or even the SME marketplaces? Because when I look at my career, I have dealt with the largest enterprise customers, specifically in Europe, whether it's financial services or manufacturing industries or fashion. So we've done that. But at Logitech, which was my recent experience, where we saw incredible growth in the video collaborations, that was from a large enterprise customer down to a very small organization of 5-10 people. And, it'd be, rather than having, a handful of deals which you could manage closely on a quarterly basis, you're talking about thousands of transactions. And that gives different challenges, because as well as having the right people to manage that growth, you also need to build those processes behind it to provide with to give the business the accuracy of what the forecast and the revenue is going to be, whether it's demands on supply chain or with the SaaS environment, just understanding what resources are required to deliver. So yeah, I think it's growth is good fun. It's getting the right people to deliver, but it's also understanding where the demand is, the market, where your addressable customer base is, and just setting out those objectives and giving the team as much support as possible to deliver those numbers and understand their responsibilities in delivering those numbers as well.
It sounds like, when you look at a zoomed out view of your career, you've had a really successful career in those high growth environments. What were some of the mistakes or some of the failures that you had along the way that contributed to that success?
I think one is when you're in that fast environment of growth in any organizations, sometimes you still don't invest in what the future is with the team. So maybe not continuously interviewing, even when there isn't a role currently, but you always need to continually, see talent, interview talent for the future. And I would say that's something that I definitely sometimes don't do, because you're in a moment where everything moves so fast and you have so many challenges, you've got to prioritize. Maybe that's one of the priorities sometimes myself and many others put to one side. So that would be, the continued development of the team you're building to deliver that growth. Because the recruitment curve very often is behind that growth curve. And you need to try and, get those people in as quickly as possible. And recruiting great talent in those environments, it's a challenge, because it's a big risk for every organization. When you hire someone, their CV might look great, but culturally they have to be a great fit. And therefore the investment in that time is something that I'm aware of, and is something that I'd like to do more of.
That makes sense. I think that's really interesting, especially when you don't have a role. So how do you open up some of those conversations where you want to be interviewing people, but you don't actually have a role available?
And that's another challenge, because most people will interview when there is a role. I think you just got to be very open and transparent with people. I think, the likes of LinkedIn makes it very easy to connect with people nowadays and have those conversations. And it doesn't have to be just an interview. It can be just conversations for the future. And that's something that I think people should invest, and that to me is an ongoing process. And whether it's a function with the talent teams or the HR teams in organizations, but it's something that's got to be invested in for the long term. Because at the end of the day, if you want to deliver great customer satisfaction, great relationships, you need the teams in place to deliver. And that, I think, is a challenge for every organization going through those growth stages, as well as how do you make the roles easier for those people to deliver. That's where you start looking at the data, the details, but those back-end processes, whether it's a B2C organization or a B2B organization, the processes are very different, and the support those individuals need, especially with enterprise class sales, you need the right solutions internally to support the teams to deliver the number, and make sure they understand why you are asking to have a CRM solution for Salesforce forecasting compared with asking people to do it on a spreadsheet. And you've got to commit to that objective and ensure if you're going to commit to a CRM, you commit to a CRM. You don't also ask the sales team, can you also do a spreadsheet, or can you just put it on an email to me? It's the direction you go in strategically, and therefore you've got to set that objective. But you as a leader has to also stick to that, even when sometimes it's not the easiest option.
I would like to go a little bit back into your career and kind of go through the whole journey. What made you choose IT, and what made you choose sales at the beginning?
I think at an early age, I enjoyed sales. My father in in Wales had a garage with car sales, and I spent my youth kind of in that environment where you're building relationships quickly. So that's the sales. But I went to Kingston University, where I did an IT degree, and from that I fell into a fairly new company back then called Dell Computers. And that's where my sales career started. I think I was number 615 as employees. So it was a long time ago. But that was my sales number anyway. So and from I was at Computercentre for nearly 3 years, and that was the start of my career. It was I did an IT degree. I really enjoyed sales, being that sociable person, and I went from that IT degree to going into IT sales, which seemed the obvious decision at the time. And I realised how lucky I am. It's a fantastic industry to be in. It's an exciting, fast-moving industry, and I've enjoyed several roles with several companies, from the largest corporates to startups, where literally I'm was the first person in that startup in Europe, mostly for American companies. So that's the difference is from leading and managing second level managers and 150 people to being part of a team of 50 people globally, and being the first person in Europe where you've got to wear many hats to kind of get the message out there and drive those sales. I think I prefer, when I look back on it, I prefer the scale up opportunities in the large organizations compared with that startup environment where the challenges are cash flow. The challenges are how are you going to sell to organizations who don't know who you are, and maybe even question the financial viability of that startup. But I've done both. I'm glad I've done both, because I think it gives me that wider skill set of being happy to wear many hats, but not just be a manager sitting at his desk. Being someone who is very happy to get involved in the customer relationships and driving sales, as well as supporting and leading second line managers to make sure their teams are successful as well.
So what were some of the things that you did to grow throughout your career to make you more adaptable and better for these different situations?
I think the experience in working in different organizations and also in different markets, because we talked about working in IT, but I've gone from the vendor relationships to working at one of the Europe's leading resellers, or as it was at the time, or integrated today, to the software world, where either it's SaaS or on-premise solutions, and we drove that. So working in those different environments, which includes fintech, which includes the storage data center environments, but also includes SaaS solutions, whether it's infrastructure, MarTech, and fintech. So I think that diverse experience in the IT sector really helps me in understanding different demands. But growth, the management of growth, actually, that's market, whether it's infrastructure or SaaS or video collaboration. It's still about people. It's still about managing, creating that demand, managing how we're going to hit those goals with the teams, and supporting that team or driving that team through emotional intelligence and leadership styles to make sure everyone's successful, because it's a team sport. And one leader in the Nordics might have a very different approach to your sales leader in Southern Europe. And you've got to support that, manage that, and really build those one-to-one relationships with your direct line managers, because again, it's the responsibility and the trust, and if they fail, I fail, and likewise, if I don't give them that support, you're not going to deliver the growth that we always want to deliver for the business.
You mentioned about failure. What's your approach to dealing with failure?
I think it's you've got to be aware when you're failing, and if it's a decision, there's many reasons why that happens. But as long as you don't repeat the same mistake expecting a different result. If you lose a deal, and everybody does lose deals, obviously, or it's a bad hire, or you're not delivering the growth that you expected for whatever reason, you've got to try and fix that problem, and do that as quickly as possible, and not just keep on sticking to the objectives you've set, which may be not the right objectives. So it comes with that flexibility. It comes with being self-aware that if a mistake has been made or something's happened, you fix it and move on as quickly as possible. And everybody, no one likes making mistakes, but we're all human. And when mistakes are made, that transparency, that openness, and again, going back to that trust, which you build with your team, to know that people are happy to say, "Hey, we got it wrong. Let's do this to fix that problem, to drive the results that we all want to succeed at."
That makes sense. And would you mind talking us through? So I know you've mentioned a couple bits here and there. Would you mind talking through your career from kind of start to where you are now?
Yeah, as I say, it's probably 30 years. So I had a great experience at Dell in the early days, and that very much, the PCs, and that was selling to government. Then I went to Computercentre, which really was providing solutions and really everything driven by customer relationships. And that's where I first got my, let's say, leadership role within the government teams, where we saw phenomenal growth from, I think, 30 million to, as I said, about 500 million over a long time. But it was a great team we had at Computercentre, and I think Computercentre really gave me the basis of the solution selling approach, which we haven't touched on. And solution selling is really important especially when you're selling to enterprise. You've got to understand the business value in why an enterprise customer is going to invest in your solution. So I was at Computercentre, I think, about 11 years, and that's when I made the move into software, and that was just, I had the opportunity and joined Novell, which was interesting because Novell had a declining business in their infrastructure, let's say the workplace, the old, NetWare and GroupWise and all these kind of products, which were obviously in decline. But it was an exciting time because they were also a market leader in identity and security solutions, and also with SUSE Linux, which was the open source technology. And that's where I also got that experience in working in the open source community as well, which I think is a great place. So I was at Novell for 7, maybe 8 years, and Novell got acquired. And at that level, the role which I was in, leading the UK and Ireland business, is a 100 million software business, came to an end, and that's when I moved into a couple of startups. And so I did a few startups with all American based, which gave me another great experience, because then I started, spending 3 weeks out of 4 in the US, driving, sales, and that was data solutions, data migration
Okay.
solutions, which was great fun, but hard work because you're wearing many hats. You don't have the resources required. So there's did that, and some did fail because you think the solution that you're working with is a great solution, but then sometimes it's too early for the market. The demand isn't there, and that's another challenge. If you go to a startup, you really do have to have the solution which delivers, and there's a demand in the market for it. So that was several learnings, and I think there was 4 startups I've actually done, which gives you that challenge. You do in a startup, have you wear many hats. It's about the cash flow, about making the decisions and prioritizing more than anything else, because you really you do have deals where getting the cash in is the most important priority. So that was an interesting stage of my career. Again, giving me a real variety of skills and what you have to do. So I went from literally a senior management role where I was third line managers, managing $100 million software business, to literally doing pipeline creation, demand generation, selling, invoicing, cash flow, and everything with no resources. So I think that flexibility has given me an understanding of there's never one answer. There's multiple different answers to different challenges, and you've got to look at that and understand that what is the best solution for at that time. So that's a really interesting time. And then I went back into fintech for a little while, which was basically bringing 3 organizations into one. So it's very internal based, but it was a leader in financial services. But that was only for a few years, and then I was lucky enough to go into Martech with Magento, which was acquired by Adobe after a few years. And the team there was, again, high growth, delivering in excess of 200% every year, going from an on-premise solution to an e-commerce SaaS solution, and always working with partners. That partner ecosystem, as well as the customers, the partner ecosystem, especially Magento, was incredible. So you had relationships with the partner and relationships with the end customers, and a great organization where the growth was really, really good fun in a Martech environment where the demand was there. And that's where, when you look at, where you move and what organizations you want to go to, you also want to look at the market and go, is there demand? Is there growth? And if you look at the digital experience for customers to buy online and how organizations have to sell online now, it was an absolute great place to work. That e-commerce marketplace is really interesting, and that customer experience of how you attract people, how you maximize the transactions, is again a very different sales cycle and a very different approach to data center infrastructure or fintech. So really, really enjoyed that. And then my last role was leading the Logitech business for video collaboration. And during the pandemic, the demand in the market was huge, and I got the opportunity to lead that team across Europe, and we, the revenues were amazing. You saw, as I said, 300% growth on an annual basis for for nearly 2 years. And that was really growing the team again. So that was very much about how do you build for the future? Because the demand was there in the market. It was, well, how do we deliver? The products were great, but how do we deliver and also understand and manage that business when you're in that real high growth environment? And we touched on the importance of, what is your approach? How do you forecast? How do the teams, one person might be really optimistic in their forecast, another person can be really conservative. And when you bring all those parts together, to give the business as accurate as possible forecast, because business decisions are made on those revenues, it is a challenge. But it was an exciting time, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And yeah, we'll see what happens next.
So you mentioned a couple of times great teams. So what do you think makes a team great?
Trust. Okay. I think selecting the right people in an organization is critical. The cultural fit has to be great. You want a positive environment. You want people to be motivated, where we all agree with the objective. So you've got to communicate. You don't want that silence, because you can hold people to account and make people responsible as long as they understand what the goal is. If someone doesn't understand what the goal is and they don't understand what my expectations are or the organization's expectations, how can you hold them to account? So again, a great team is about building trust both ways. So if someone does make a mistake, they're happy to put their hand up, and they know that they'll be supported and coached through it, and also have fun. I think people don't. When I say fun, we all work very hard. You spend such a huge part of your time working. You want to enjoy that environment, and that's where leadership becomes so important. Managing those people who need different expectations. So, I've had great sales leaders who sometimes need to be told, put the phone down and go for a walk for an hour, because these people, so many people work so hard. You need to also understand that some people need to step back sometimes before they make the wrong decision. And that's, I think, coming back to what we said in the beginning about the importance of emotional intelligence, about empathy, about, different people need different things. One person might want to be told, we do it this way, let's go. Or some people might want to have input into that decision-making process and more of a democratic kind of viewpoint, where, you're allowing people to make the decision, because if someone has the responsibility of making a decision, they've bought into that decision. So I think building trust, helping people succeed through different leadership styles, coaching, and that environment where people, want to come to work. They enjoy their work. And to me, if you're happy in work, it makes a huge difference, because you then succeed.
Who would you say is the best leader, or the leader that has had the most emotional intelligence that you've had in your career?
Oh, I think you look at some of the people. I mentioned Computercentre several times with Mike Norris, who's been at the CEO of Computercentre for a very long time and hugely successful. That was a great environment. Also, there's Colin Brown, who was my direct manager at Computercentre, and a long-term friend. But you go back to even the Michael Dells of this world, inspirational. So yeah, I think it's been great. The last one I think was when you look at Mark Lavelle and Gary Spector, and people like that. So you have these leaders who lead by example, who support people, and drive that business forward, which I think is the right way to do it.
One of the things I wanted to go back into is you've mentioned first line leadership, second line leadership, I think also third line leadership. What do you think is the difference as you progress through those lines of leadership that you need to adapt to as a leader?
Trust in delegation. You can't do everything yourself. And when the people who are closer to the cold face and are driving the business, you've got to give them total trust. You want to be seen and actually work with people at all. It doesn't matter, whatever the level is. You want to be able to be open, transparent, and have a relationship with everybody, or as much as possible. But I think the higher you go in an organization, sometimes it gets more and more internally focused. And that's the challenge where you've got to ensure that you try to your best to stay. At the end of the day, customers pay the bills in buying those solutions, and I do love that part of the business of meeting people and building those relationships. So I think the roles and responsibilities change, but I also believe that the core skill sets are very similar.
That's great. That's great. So just as we close, we have a closing tradition called our Quickfire questions. So I will ask you a few questions in quick succession, and you answer basically as quickly as you can.
Okay.
What are the top 3 things that you look for when you're hiring someone?
Work ethic, experience, and likability.
Okay. Do you hire on attitude or skill first?
I think attitude. I think,
Okay.
go back to that work ethic I just mentioned. Someone might have, tick all the boxes, but if they don't have that, right attitude, culturally, it could be, it could be a challenge.
Okay. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Relationships and empathy are key, so those people skills.
And what would you like to do next?
I'd like to continue in those growth challenges and drive businesses, but also really enjoy coaching and developing teams. And so going back, to the people side, I'm a very people first kind of individual. I think people drive change. I think people drive success. And therefore, whatever my next challenges are, it will be to help manage, lead, coach, and develop teams for success.
Love that. And final question, what advice would you give to someone at the start of their career?
Listen, understand the objectives, and don't be frightened to make a mistake, because experience will help you, be successful. But everybody in their careers will lose deals. It's the fact of sales, and sales, I think, is a very challenging career. It's a hugely fulfilling career. I've enjoyed every minute of it. But I think my advice to anybody would be, understand your customer needs and build relationships.
I'm going to be cheeky and squeeze in one more question. What has been your proudest moment of your career?
Oh, I think there's been many, because I've really enjoyed, seeing people develop and become successful. So that there's not one individual one. There's many of where someone's been in my team and they've gone on to be hugely successful. And that to me is probably the proudest moments. Maybe we don't even ever say it, but to me that's great. And winning those first deals all those years ago, Dell, Computercentre, and Novell have been a hugely proud moment.
Sean, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your stories and your journeys. And I really, really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, and all the best as you look for your next adventure and challenge of growth.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening, and see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to What Makes You Tick, and I hope you've enjoyed listening as much as I've enjoyed having the conversation.
Absolutely. You don't have to have met someone in real life to be mentored by them, right? We've all got favorite sales books, and hopefully this podcast is giving you access to a whole new tribe of mentors who, through their stories and best advice, will help you to achieve a bigger and better career in tech. So if you want to never miss a beat, subscribe now, and then you'll get notified as soon as next week's mentor releases their story. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.